I don't like this policy at all. I think you've got a situation where Bernie Sanders is for something, the progressive left is for something, and the kind of populist nationalist right is for it. And typically when those two groups are agreeing, the policy is bad.
Gentleman, if you want to consider him that, is Michael Strain. He is the director of economic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute. And he's not a populist. He doesn't like populists. And he's mad. He's real mad that there is currently a bipartisan effort to potentially cap interest rates for credit cards. And when I say it's a bipartisan effort, I'm not joking. This is a story that we covered last week. There was a Senate hearing in which Republican Senator Josh Hawley was really taking, representatives from Visa and MasterCard to task. And so I want to give you some more details about this bipartisan effort. So, surprisingly, Trump was actually the one to kick off this whole policy discourse. And this is what Trump's really good at doing, right? He's really good at presenting himself as this populist and then doesn't really deliver on things like this. So believe me, I'm not naive and I'm not holding my breath, but I would love for him to do this. And I would be very surprised, very happy, and I'd give him credit. But he basically pitched while he was on the campaign trail that he would temporarily cap credit card interest rates at around 10%, which by the way, is still pretty high, is still going to guarantee significant profits for these credit card companies. But that cap is significant as well when you have credit card companies issuing interest rates at like 24, 25%. So, and that's for people who have good credit. I have great credit. I'm in the 800s. My credit card interest rate is 25%. It's wild. So now over the last month, Bernie Sanders did what I think is a great strategy. He reminded Trump of his promise, saying, I look forward to working with the Trump administration on fulfilling his promise to cap credit card interest rates at 10%. We cannot continue to allow big banks to to make record profits by ripping off Americans by charging them 25 to 30% interest rates. That's usury. Now, Josh Hawley, Republican senator, jumped on board, also writing on X. Let's take a look at this. An anti-usury bill capping outrageous credit card rates ought to be a top priority of the next Congress. Now, during a Senate hearing with MasterCard and Visa, Hawley went on a tear about what credit card companies are doing in their business practices and how it's harming American consumers. Take a look.
Do either of you know how much debt is owed on your networks, Ms. Kirkpatrick?
We're not the bank, so we don't have visibility into that information. We also don't generate revenue from interchange.
Oh, okay, you have no idea. Mr. Sheedy, do you know?
I don't know.
Well, let me help you out. Let's have a look. It's $1.17 trillion. $1.17 trillion is what consumers now owe on your credit card networks. Do either of you know what the average interest rate is on your networks? Ms. Kirkpatrick?
Oh, Senator, we're not the bank. We don't set the interchange.
I know,
we don't set the
benefit
rates
from it, and you know. Do you know what it is? This is your business model.
We don't collect revenue from interest rates.
Do you know?
I don't, Senator.
I mean, do either of you read the newspaper? Forbes magazine just estimated last week that the average credit card APR in your networks is 28.75%. Average.
That's pretty high. And that's pretty disastrous. And it's crushing Americans. As I shared with you all in a story I covered earlier today, credit card debt has reached 1.3 trillion. Okay. I remember doing stories about student loan debt when it reached 1.3 trillion and how disastrous that is for, the personal finances of all of these college grads. But those are, for the most part, low interest federal loans. When we're talking about credit cards, that's an entirely different animal, which is why we're starting to see credit card delinquencies spike up. So, by the way, that problem has just gotten even worse because interest rates on store-branded credit cards just got jacked up even more. At least 50 companies, including Big Lots, Gap, Petco, Burlington, Macy's, and TJ or TJX companies, Marshalls, Home Goods, TJ Maxx falls under that umbrella, increased the APRs on their credit cards between September of 2023 and September of 2024, according to a review of data gathered by Bankrate.com. Now, the reason why they did this is partly due to the proposed rule by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that would have capped late fees at $8 per incident, as opposed to $32 and stuff like that. So essentially, they were expecting certain regulations to be pursued that could have hurt their bottom line a little bit. So they preemptively decided to jack up their interest rates for their credit cards even more. And so, by the way, the rule that I was referring to from the CFPB actually ended up getting tied up in court. And now it's unlikely that whoever Trump appoints to lead the CFPB would even keep that fight going. So that's something to keep in mind. But even though the rule never actually took effect, companies, again, decided to preemptively increase the interest rates on these credit cards. Synchrony and Bread Financial, which specialize in issuing branded cards for companies including Verizon and JCPenney, raised the annual percentage rates, or APRs, on their portfolios by an average of 3 to 5 percentage points. Bread began boosting the rate on some of its credit cards in late 2023 in anticipation for the CFPB rule. Bread CFO Perry Bieberman told analysts in October. And finally, cards from Banana Republic and Athleta, issued by Barclays, each saw an APR jump of 5 percentage points in the past year. The Home Depot card from Citigroup had a rise of 3 percentage points, while the bank raised the APR on its major card by 4 percentage points. So it is amazing to me that as these interest rate increases are taking place, you have this guy from the American Enterprise Institute going on CNBC, the prime place to do this, by the way, to trash Democrats and Republicans coming together on behalf of the American people, so they're no longer crushed to the extent that they're crushed by these, financial institutions. And I guess I'm not surprised, Waz. I'm sure you're not surprised either. But I think the real threat to the corporate culture in our government right now, or in our country right now, is a bit of a populist uprising against this kind of predatory activity. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously CNBC is enemy number one of the people. That's where all of the oligarchs go to launder their rapacious business practices and all the fleecing that they do of the public, and pretend that they're somehow, buttressing our economy and making our lives great by themselves becoming richer than God. Like, nobody should be surprised that this kind of rhetoric happens on CNBC. And, Josh Hawley, like, obviously not the greatest politician we've ever seen, but he does fancy himself to be a more populist, new right, quote unquote, figure. And I'm not surprised that he's going after these guys. He's part of the wing of the Republican Party that's trying to steer away from, basically the ultra business focused establishment wing of the party and be more populist. Of course, they're pairing that with xenophobia and all kinds of other stuff. But like, this is like a path that Josh Hawley, JD Vance, that these guys are trying to blaze over in the Republican Party. And of course, Bernie Sanders, these are the kinds of policies he's been advocating for literally his entire freaking life, right? So we shouldn't be surprised. And, when this guy comes out and says, it's bipartisan and it's annoying and, it's populist or whatever, I think the listeners should just understand one thing. You shouldn't base your politics around a group of people who you found to be annoying. So just because Josh Hawley, who most of the times is super duper annoying, because he agrees with something doesn't mean I'm automatically against it. No, if Josh Hawley is for something that I think is to the benefit of the vast majority of the American people, of course, people like Bernie Sanders should support it. Of course, Bernie Sanders should remind Donald Trump that on the campaign stump that he was promising people to deliver lower interest rates on their credit cards so that they're not hampered and crippled by these payments. So yeah, I love it, honestly, to see this kind of bipartisan work in action, because usually, Anna, when it's bipartisan, it's just for wars and to line the pockets of the military-industrial complex.
You're absolutely right about that. Bipartisanship, I would even say 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, was like a dirty word for the left because it only meant one thing. It only meant that the Democratic Party was going to concede to the wishes of the Republican Party for pro-corporate policies or pro-war, international policies. And so I'm really happy to see a focus on financial institutions and to see any Republican on board for this issue. At least, for now, it is rhetorical, right? And in some cases, they will co-sponsor legislation, but a case could be made that they're doing that knowing that the legislation isn't going to pass. So it's an easy way to signal that you're looking out for the American people without really worrying about upsetting your donors, because that policy is very likely to pass. Our corporate captured lawmakers in Congress. But nonetheless, what I do like is seeing someone like Bernie Sanders keep his eye on the ball and continue bringing this issue up. Like, you guys say you want to do this, great. I want to do it too. Let's work together, because it's really holding their feet to the fire. Because if they're just engaging in populist branding to win elections, well, they should be held accountable for that by the voters who believe them, right? Next time around when they're up for re-election. And it's going to be difficult to do that when they're able to take on this branding without anyone ever challenging them or holding them accountable. So I think Bernie is real in wanting to work with like-minded people on policies they agree on. So I don't think he's just simply doing this as a strategy, but there is also that strategy component to it, which I think is smart. But what are your thoughts on that? Because there is a contingent of, or I should say like a faction of the left that just hates the Republican Party so much that they think, no, these people are liars. Like, you're helping to launder their reputations by pretending like they're economic populists. They're not, they're all corrupt. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, laundering their reputations, calling them fascists and besmirching them. Did that get anybody anywhere? Did calling them Nazis get anybody anywhere? Did, basically calling these people foaming at the mouth, racist, Jim Crow wannabes, did that get anywhere with this? So I don't understand how now the opposite, of that is now also the worst thing in the world, where your strategy didn't work. So the idea that people, and look, I will give these people the benefit of the doubt. It's exactly what the Republicans did to Barack Obama when he came in office, right? It's like all of a sudden they didn't want their own Social Security cut. All of a sudden they didn't want Mitt Romney's, healthcare plan. All of a sudden they didn't want all of these Republican sort of coded policies because they didn't want to, quote unquote, give Obama a win. And maybe that was the right thing for them to do at that time. But I think this is a much different political climate. And I just don't think people feel or the people that will make the margins for Democratic Party victories going forward. I don't think those people on the margins think that, hey man, we need to be pom-pom wavers and we need to just oppose any perceived political victories. I think people are doing bad enough in their lives that they want concrete wins for themselves, not political points for our freaking overseers in the damn government.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.